right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, to the Creative Entrepreneur Podcast with your hosts, Connor Cherland. I'm David Segall, and we're here talking today about fear.
That's why we're braving the cold.
That's right. We're sitting outside today. We're doing the podcast outside in my friend's backyard. Thanks, Filippo, for loaning us this backyard without even knowing about it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what fear is to the artist and or entrepreneur. It's really no difference in regards to that, and the journey from making it your foe and turning it into your ally. How we can use it as a force to propel us.
Yeah.
So
what do you fear? Like in doing this full time. Putting out music.
Yeah, I would say a few of my biggest fears are fear of rejection.
Meaning,
I guess just
like,
not.
Hey, dude, I don't like what you do.
Yeah,
right?
Just exactly like whatever
Okay.
whatever I'm creating, it not being accepted, whatever that means.
Sure.
Another fear I've carried a lot as an artist performer is like not enough people coming to the shows that I put on.
Right.
The ones
which is
that
also
like,
rejection.
Exactly. It's kind
sense.
of it's true. It's pretty much rejection. But I will say I do think maybe an even more powerful one underneath all this, and it's kind of an oxymoron, but it's something that a lot of us deal with, is fear of success. Like,
do you really?
What do you do? What if what you're creating, what you're making and offering to the world, all of a sudden becomes a huge sensation, a hit, a success?
That worries you?
Well, just to a certain degree, because I know that we have to be prepared for success. Success doesn't just happen. I mean, sometimes it does just happen, but then it doesn't last because people aren't prepared for it.
Right.
So
there's a line that Dave Chappelle says where he says, "Success takes you where virtue cannot sustain you," which is a very scary way to say it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I would understand why it would bring fear.
Yeah, and then there's this famous Marianne Williamson quote that says something along the lines of, "Our greatest fear is not of failure, but of our own light and power," and that what's the world going to think if we let ourselves really shine honestly and truthfully and not hold back who we really are. So yeah, I would say those are some of the fears that I have wrestled with in the past, and I do, in hindsight, I can see the progress that I've made in overcoming them, facing them, and overcoming them. And I think that's been the greatest lesson for me, is that fears don't go away.
Yeah.
Until you really look them in the eye, and face them and talk to them almost and say, what are you here to teach me?
Sure.
Because a lot of times we try to sweep our fears under the carpet, and then unfortunately they control our life. They kind of dictate our lives because they're subconsciously dictating us. If that makes sense. I don't know. Is
I need to continue to dig in with fear of success, because that's. Well, how are you defining success? Is it like you become so popular, so busy that you don't get to do the things that you really love and enjoy?
Not so much that, although that's probably some part of it. It's more about it's hard to explain a little bit, but it's like if you make it to the top of the mountain, well, then what? And again, this is the ego.
Sure.
I believe that all fear comes from the ego, which again, the ego is a part of our mind-body mechanism that we need. It's not something that we are here to destroy, but through the practices that we were talking about in our last podcast of the mindful arts and meditation, we learn to be the big brother to our ego, and the ego is our little brother, and we subdue it, and we don't let it essentially run us, right? So so I know that coming from from the ego talking, it sometimes says, well, if you do make it, then then what are you going to do? Are you going to ever be able to create something any better than what you made that was a success?
Interesting.
Or, or even saying things like, this won't last, it's just, whatever it is. And I've realized that I've had to reframe the way I look at myself and what I'm doing with music and the arts and entrepreneurship, to where it's not about me. It's not about little me, which is ego.
Yeah.
It's not about the ego. And it's really challenging for us to detach from our identification as artists, entrepreneurs, creators of any kind. Whether you're an artist, again, a musician, a business owner, a bodybuilder, we get really attached to these identities that we carry. I mean, obviously they're part of our personality, but I don't believe that they're part of our soul per se, or a part of our higher self.
Yeah.
And I've had to come to that realization that as a creator, artist, entrepreneur, my purpose for being here is to channel through and share what I'm inspired, what inspiration brings up from within us.
Right.
And for me, that's music. And so I've shifted to the standpoint of I am a servant and an instrument of music, which music to me is a much greater power than I or you or any single one of us. It's a creative force. And I liken it to be a one facet of what we would call God or the universe or spirit. I think that music has its own consciousness, and it sounds funny, but I believe that. So anyways, that's one of the ways that I've learned to, at least I won't say that I've overcome all my fears, because obviously I haven't.
Right.
I don't think very few of us have until we get to that state of enlightenment.
Right.
But it's helped me to make leeway, to make ground in terms of overcoming and climbing that mountain and standing at the top of the peak and saying, okay, you know what, I'm at peace now because I have greater clarity.
Yeah.
I can look over the world in a different way.
Sure. That's interesting.
So tell me about a little bit of your fears, I guess.
I just never heard of fear of success, but
oh really?
Yeah, never.
Yeah.
Well, because I've heard of self-sabotage.
Right.
There are some friends who have done some self-sabotaging, but I only know self-sabotage in the scenario where what you are trying to do is wrong, or is out of line with your character, so you're trying to sabotage it so it actually doesn't happen. So you're only like half trying.
Right.
So that's really interesting. I've never heard it for something that's like kind of positive.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because for me, hearing self-sabotage, to me, personally, that is kind of an extension of what I was talking about. I think that my ego in the past has definitely tried to throw a wrench in the gears because of fear of making it to a certain level. And what are the implications then? Then you have to live up to a certain set of standards, and society is going to see you as a certain way. And essentially, you will no longer be free. Again, this is the story that my mind has told me.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, if you make it, then you could become entangled and enslaved to whatever it is you're doing.
Right.
So, and that is where, like, I guess the spiritual path in a way has helped me tremendously, is to overcome that and say,
yeah,
nothing is going to bind me or enslave me forever. I mean, and essentially nothing is forever. I mean, our careers have a beginning point and an end point. Our lives in this particular chapter of living have a beginning and an end point. So I think that's liberating too, to remember that nothing is forever. And even quote unquote success, I mean, we'll have hits, we'll have products or ideas that might take off, but time and tide is going to wash those away like Castle Sands. And what's cool about that is that it brings us back into this eternal present moment, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that really matters is the present moment. I mean, we've had albums we've released and songs we've released, and it's been great. It's been fun to throw the album release parties and do music videos.
David released a new song today.
Yeah.
You can find it on the internet. It's a remix of a song that he already put out.
That's right.
Fire Woman.
Done by...
That woman's fire. Fire Woman.
Check it out. But yeah, I mean, it's already yesterday's news.
Right. Yeah.
Especially by the time people are going to be hearing this.
Yeah.
But you know, that's what's kind of incredible is like, you know what? We do our best every single day, every month, you know, every chapter of our lives. We put out the things, we share the things that we are inspired to share, and then we do it all over again.
Right.
So I think that's another powerful thing of overcoming our fears is, you know what? This is just one chapter in the game. Just play your part. This chapter will have its end, and there'll be a new chapter.
Right. That's one of the guys that I follow online. His name's Gary Vaynerchuk. He says your superpower is to change your mind. To like at 55 start a new career and redefine yourself.
Yeah.
In your mid 50s, which is a really scary thing to do. And it's why a lot of people go crazy when they retire.
Right.
Because who you are, like who you were, is dead. That person retired.
Exactly.
Meaning died.
Exactly. Right.
And who you are now is, I don't know.
Right.
You just watch TV, I guess.
No, it's so true.
Versus like saying, now I need to find this new thing to keep me going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few fears.
Yeah.
Many.
Okay.
One is disappointing my family. That's like a big one. Being a disappointment and letting down my friends and family. I get asked once in a while, so what do you think you want to do with the next 5 years? Like, what do you see in the future? And that's this ominous question of, the question is, do you think you're still going to be doing music in 5 years?
Right.
And I, with shame in my tone, say, I think I'll be a musician.
Yeah.
And so that's the fear that's drawing there is the fear of letting people down, not having enough money to do the things that we as a group want to do and want to have achieved.
Right.
But the bigger fear that I have that drives me more is the fear of looking back and regretting not having done it.
Right.
So if I were to go and get, and I've had dreams about this, like actual nightmares, and the nightmares are very tame. They wouldn't scare anybody, but they're emotionally tense.
Sure.
And it's me sitting at my old job. I'll tell you the real one. This is this is how it went. Me sitting like a couple desks down from my old boss. We're both working on computers, and then like 8 desks down is this guy singing a Hozier cover better than me.
That is incredible.
And I woke up. It's funny.
Yeah.
But it's also like, man, that's simple. It's very simple, like
right.
Because I want to for me it's not about pride. Like I don't need to succeed in music to feel good about myself. Clearly I'm still a nobody and I still feel good about myself. So
you're not a nobody, Connor.
I'm a somebody to a few. And that's cool, but
waves,
like
my man.
but like compared to what most people assume is the goal, which is like, don't you want to be famous and make a ton of money? And it's like, look, does a school teacher want to be famous? The school teacher has like a noble cause and makes a humble salary and then goes for it.
And then that also brings up the point of, what is success really? I mean, and I think what you and I probably agree upon is that success in our eyes does not necessarily mean pop stardom. I mean, I at least in my case, I'm speaking personally, but success for me is being able to do what I love creatively, share it, and for it to be of some value and service to my community and my world, and to make a living doing it, and have the freedom and ability to travel and share it with new people in new places.
Right.
So from that, again, and I think a lot of what we're talking about here, it's pretty obvious that fear and ego are inseparable. They kind of stem from the same roots.
Yeah.
And so there is something really helpful about realizing that we are nothing and we're everything all at once. It's sort of like that concept of, gazing up at the stars, and you realize, I mean, if you're in the high desert somewhere, how many galaxies are out there, and how many planets and solar systems are in each one of those galaxies. And I don't know about you, but I definitely believe that there is life in those other, obviously,
yeah.
There's billions of other galaxies. Yeah. So in reality, this little human play, this little human drama or comedy or dramedy that we're living is so tiny. And really, at the end of the day, we will be dust in the wind to some degree. However, at the same time,
to quote Kansas,
right? At the same time, we're connected to all of it, including the universe, the supreme, the spirit of creation, whatever we want to call it. There's no separation, between us and all of it. So that's what's so cool is embracing the creator within us, which so
it's just the part, like, I think about it like picking up trash. Like, everybody, like, it doesn't matter if one person picks up trash.
Right.
If everybody picks up trash, there'd be no trash.
Right.
So, wait, does it matter, or does it not matter if one person picks up trash?
Totally
it's that same thing where it's like, totally doesn't, totally does.
Yeah.
Like, because how one person lives their life is the way that the world could be.
That's right.
And that's like one of the struggles you have to deal with is like and I think this plays into another fear, which is like, as you continue to make art and do your best and try, and it not be received as you intended, the fear is because it's past rejection to, like, does what I do matter? Like, it's like this existential thing.
Sure.
Which I think is important to answer, though not helpful all the time, because like, I feel that weight sometimes, but then I go and do something, like go pick up trash and, like, try and remember, like, no and yes. Like, it's not so important, and it's infinitely important.
Right.
Because people having hearts that are alive and being willing to share those hearts is the backbone of society.
Right.
And I think you
could say it's what holds community together in a sense.
And, like, we have chosen a job where we are going to share our heart. Well, that's one. But share our hearts with people,
right?
Vulnerably and often, which is like, and like, be practiced, skilled communicators in, like, a heartful space, and that's
authentically.
Yeah, which is how I think we would hope the world would behave.
Sure. Yeah, and well, it's interesting because it brings me back to that Merriam-Webster quote that is, I've seen it everywhere, but in
it was also in Coach Carter.
Oh yeah, was it? Okay. But in it she says that essentially what you were talking about, like, by allowing ourselves to shine authentically, to live authentically, from our heart, from what we love, from the love within us, we give others permission to do the same. So along those same lines of, you're saying we could only hope that all of the world would live as openly and honestly, and in a sense with courage, courage. That's the incredible thing. And I know all of you out there listening and watching have experienced this, where you either saw someone do something that was very frightening, and because you observed it, you thought, you know what, I can do that. Or you've done something in front of others, your family or whatever, that they were like, oh my God, that was crazy. I can't believe you did that. But then because you did it, they then followed suit.
Right.
Because, and it's incredible how connected we all are. All, not only human beings, but, we're so connected to each other, and we're so connected to our environment. It's amazing. So what are some of the things, did you identify all your fears, or did we just talk about one? Because I would like to know what has worked for you in surmounting those fears.
I also have a fear of poverty.
Right.
That's
for some reason that is not so much a fear of mine. But
I know
that's driven
it's an
people.
incredible strength of yours.
Well, I won't say that it is. I mean,
I will say that it is.
Yeah. But that's an interesting thing, and it's an important one to bring up. And I think, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I know that it also has to do a little bit with an upraising thing too, right? I mean, I do remember when I was younger. Actually, I had a very kind of frugal grandfather.
Yeah.
And I always thought money was a very scarce thing, and to like spending it was like a sin. So I did, but as an adult, it shifted. But tell me a little bit more about that fear.
I like that you said grandfather, because there's actually like I had a buddy recently tell me, he's like, and I don't mean to sound like your grandfather, but honestly, like every $5 you don't spend, you could save.
Yeah.
And I was like, that does sound like a grandfather. There's wisdom
to that.
And then there's also like doing it in such a masochistic way that you never have what you need.
Right.
And then
that's right. Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, my family always had plenty of money.
Mm-hmm.
Like weren't rich.
Right.
But like had money.
Right.
And now that my parents are retired and some other parents are not retired, I'm like, oh, my parents, like the reason why I wasn't allowed to have a GameCube forever was because my parents didn't want me on video games.
Right.
It wasn't because we didn't have the money. And like the reason why we didn't go on this kind of vacation or this kind of vacation is because we went on a different kind of vacation. And it was like less flashy, but like just as expensive, and like all these things that I didn't see in the background. So as a kid, I saw like some other people living a certain life and being like, "That's rich."
Right.
They got all these games.
Of course, grass is always greener.
Yeah,
I experienced the same thing.
Yeah. It turns out I was fine the whole time.
Right.
Totally fine.
Right.
And it's.
But I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, because mine was a similar upbringing where my family was very middle class, probably almost lower middle class, or right around the middle. But it always kind of felt like, and again, this is just in the mind, but it always kind of felt like we almost, we're right on that edge, or maybe we don't have enough.
Yeah.
But that's another really interesting question: is what is enough?
Right.
A roof over our head, food to eat. We're taken care of, but it's interesting because we live in this kind of hierarchical society where you see, people or families that are much more affluent than the ones you came from, and you go, man, we were poor compared to them, and whatever, comparatively, but it's all about perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, to an extent.
Okay, tell me more.
Because I think healthcare is where, I will say healthcare specifically within these last 3 years has been one of my just points of fear, because it's in order to care for myself and my health, I need to spend a ton of money. I'm not on like a traditional healthcare. I'm on like a health share program, so it's like you pay a lesser amount into like this pool, and then like when someone needs it, you like your money goes to them, and when you need it, their money goes to you.
Yeah.
So it's like dependable enough, but it doesn't cover dental, and it doesn't cover like the deductible's like super high.
Yeah.
So in general, it's not like it's.
We've got some creatures behind us.
This is a strong creature. We will not be afraid of it, though.
That's the healthcare people listening to what you're saying. They send rodents to.
Yeah. So I would say like, as long as you're healthy, and have like the basic things covered, then sure. But like, I like avoided the dentist for like 2 years.
I'm still avoiding the dentist. I just brush and floss. And
do you have any tooth pains?
No.
Okay.
Never had a
cavity.
So
I had tooth pains. Like,
okay. Oh yeah.
Like hard to go to sleep at night without an Advil.
Gotcha.
Kind of tooth pains, because I had a root canal growing, and so I had to get that done. Yeah, but it's all because I was like trying to figure out healthcare and like who was going to take care of me and all this stuff, and like there's so much frustration that gets taken away when you add a ton of money onto it.
Sure.
And one of the things about having less money is you have to learn from other people with less money of like how and again, the resources are there. Like there are ways to take care of ourselves.
Right.
But like getting those tips and being like, so that's been one of the things that I've really had to. It hasn't really been a mindset thing so much as like I just need to make an adjustment,
right,
and learn from people where to get the help that I need. My wife is also really good at researching things, so that's been really helpful. For her to look up like, this is going to be our dentist. This is the kind of insurance we're going to go for.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know, that fear of being poor or not having enough money, that is definitely one of those fears that can be used as fuel for the creative fire,
right,
in the creative process.
Look at all rap songs ever.
And it brings to mind too, one of the high school friends of my uncle is a billionaire now, and he lives in Beverly Hills, but also in Santa Barbara.
He lives a lot of places because he's a billionaire.
Right, I got to reconnect with him and take him out for a beer a few
you
years
treated
ago.
him?
Yeah.
Because
I wanted to pick his brain.
Yeah,
he was really.
You wanted to turn the.
He was really
the
honored
tables.
that I bought him a beer. But he told me when I asked him a little bit about what was some of the inspiration and driving force behind what he did, and he said, when I was younger, he said my family was so poor, I just wanted to have a ton of money, and I wanted to be rich. And he told me about how he read the book Think and Grow Rich, which I recommend to anybody out there, including yourself, who still wrestles with that particular fear, because in it sort of lays out the sort of spiritual philosophy or philosophical side of a wealthy state of mind and cultivating wealth and what wealth really is.
Right.
Understanding that money comes and goes, but wealth is more a state of being.
Right.
And as you were talking about, health is our greatest wealth. Not to sound overly cliche, but I will.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. If we don't have our physical health and we have tons and tons of money, it's not going to save us in the end. I mean, it might prolong certain things, but man, we got to take care of this vessel. Yeah. Mind, body, vessel first and foremost. So talk a little bit about how have you started to overcome or surmount that fear?
So part of it's like really practical, like just figuring out some of the nuts and bolts of how to care for yourself and your loved ones when you have less money. But then also, just kind of taking a stand and like understanding where my priorities lie and making like a very clear, kind of value statements, which is in my life, I want to be true to who I am. And part of that for this chapter of my life is making art full time. And that's something that requires a ton of bravery on my part. And I'm going to continue to pursue that because I see it producing like the most fruit in me. I feel more alive than I've ever. Yeah. Whole life. Yeah. It's crazy. And that's really important. And I think people need to do what makes them feel alive, because if you don't, you get this crazy resentment, and that resentment causes all kinds of stuff.
That's right.
So I would rather like proudly stand on a little pile of money and say like, this is all I got. Right. But like my heart's really big. Right. And like my soul's really strong, and like be able to really mean that versus the opposite, which is like, I feel like I'm letting myself down, but at least I'm pleasing everyone. Right. Right. And so again, like I have zero judgment for people living their lives whatever way. I just know that like this is what I need to do. Absolutely. And so because of that, I need to be strong and not be wavering and feel shame when I don't have enough money to go out to this bar, or like when I like sneak in a beer to this party that I'm going to. It's like that's just what I'm gonna do, and there's no shame. That's just what I need to do to stick to my budget. Right. Yeah. Right.
It's the Connor Cherland way. I mean, it's just, that's why you wear this jacket, sneaking. No, I so relate to what you're sharing, and I just wanted to add to that a little bit what you were talking about, doing our work in the world or acting from a place of inspiration in terms of what we're creating or what we're doing for a living, and the energy we're carrying inside, how that, again, helps to co-create our moment-by-moment reality. And I completely relate to what you were saying about that. There have been times, many times, when I've done work or types of work, even certain kinds of gigs, that I'm getting paid money to play music, but it's not the kind of gig I see myself doing. You know what I mean? I'm just, playing cover songs.
You're doing it for the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when we know we're not operating or creating or sharing at our highest level, we sometimes feel this closing feeling in the heart. And in my experience, what that's done is shut doors for me. It's literally manifested in certain things just coming to an end, falling off the face of the earth, to the point that I had to start over from scratch more than a few times. But every time I started from scratch with nothing except that open heart, being open to anything and attached to nothing. And there's something to be said about doing work that we feel personally is enriching the lives of others, because if we feel and know that in our hearts, then we become enriched. We become wealthy, and we live in this reciprocal universe and reciprocal life where whatever frequency we're emitting is what comes back to us. Whatever we're sharing, that's what comes around.
Yeah.
And if we're not sharing a lot and we're kind of, closing off our most powerful, beautiful sides of ourselves, then in a sense we cut ourselves off from the flow of money, the flow of relationship, the flow of opportunity.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience at all, or?
Kind of. There are some gigs where, like, I do a lot of work just for the money.
Right.
But I also do it with this understanding that everybody pays their dues and everybody needs practice. Today was my 700th gig.
Wow, congratulations.
In the last, since I started like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've done so many background gigs.
Right.
It's absurd.
I stopped counting a long time ago,
Yeah.
but I wish I kind of had counted.
Yeah, it's kind of obnoxious to go back and count, but
yeah.
Yeah, I personally, if there's a gig that I really don't enjoy, I try and raise the price so much that it becomes fun for me again.
I've started to do that too, actually. It's like, okay, if you want me to do, play your wedding, I would, but it's gonna have to be this much.
It's gonna have to be so fun.
Right.
I
love playing weddings, by the way. I don't know why I used a wedding per se, but
weddings are kind of
whatever
one of the easier fun ones.
Maybe a corporate event or something.
Right.
It's like. But I will say that even in those, those jobs that we sometimes have to do where we know we're not necessarily shining at our brightest, I still believe we can show up fully present, fully alive, fully ignited. And just by showing up that way and even pretending to some degree that this is the best gig of our lives, there's something that happens. There's a domino effect. And I've seen it before when I've played a gig that was just kind of a quote unquote background gig. But I decided, you know what, I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna dance a little bit while I'm looping this song and just playing instrumentally. And it's incredible to see the response that elicits in people who are present is sometimes a stronger response than like playing a show front stage and center where everybody's listening and tuned in. So it's really interesting how
looping is really helpful for that because you're basically playing to yourself.
Exactly.
And
which is much better than playing with yourself, by the way.
Yeah, sure. And that's like today I was doing a gig and I was kind of bored, so I was like, screw it, no one's listening. Like, might as well do what I want to do. So I did like a cool cover of Breaking Free from High School Musical. And I've just been getting like this like really groovy, like slow loop going. and I've like been adding in these keys, and it's been really cool.
Mm.
And yeah, and it was like for sure the coolest song because I didn't care how people felt about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like anytime I am working some of those gigs that I don't necessarily love,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do songs that are only for myself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That I'm pretty sure no one else is gonna like, but they are some of my favorites.
Right. And then people end up loving them
because they can tell that you're actually into it.
You're into it, exactly.
You're not just tuned out playing things that people like.
Yeah.
Which is like a lot of the job.
Yeah.
I thought of another fear as well. I also think it's funny that I have so many fears. So, one of the fears that I have, this sort of goes into like fear of poverty, but it's the fear of growing old and being like still where I am today. Like there's a lot of people.
Yeah, I relate to that. A friend of mine put it another way. He said, I don't want to die with the music still in me. You know? And that's actually, I think that's a quote from somewhere too. I can't remember. I heard Wayne Dyer say it once. Don't die with the music in you. And I know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this fear that we're not going to live our lives to the fullest, or we're not going to experience the level of growth that we see ourselves doing. I would say from a broader standpoint, for me, the antidote to that fear is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah.
So just making sure we're doing something every day that's creative, that's for our benefit and for the benefit of others.
Exactly.
And pushing ourselves to the degree, meaning living on the edge of our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with a friend about this the other day, that growth only happens when we're at the edge of our comfort zone, which is where our fears began.
Yeah.
So fear, growth does not happen without fear. And it doesn't happen without facing our fear and living right on that edge where fear and comfort come side by side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That's one of the things. I started listening to this guy. I don't listen to him much anymore. His name's Jim Rohn. He was like the guy who like trained up Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And one of his phrases, like he had a lot of phrases that I just didn't enjoy. Like I don't think he's my vibe. But like he said this one thing where he was like, every day you are reborn into this world, and I was like, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's a really nice thought. And like you do get to define what you were today. Like
that's right.
If you want to be a writer, tomorrow you wake up and you write something.
That's right.
And then the next day you do that. And then that day you were also a writer.
Yep.
Eventually you do that enough, you will actually be a writer. Like that'll be your thing. Like my mom has just like journaled every day for like 40 years, and when she writes you a note, it's like pretty eloquent and well thought out and like paced, and like she's just really good at that.
Yeah.
And it's because she writes every day. And
yeah. Well, on that note, I think we should conclude this podcast, because I think that's a good note for us to conclude on, is that do one thing every day that scares you, as Eleanor Roosevelt said, because you know you're growing and you're expanding if you're exercising courage in the face of fear.
Courage, the muscle.
Exactly.
And like practicing courage every day.
Which is also faith. It's also faith that what I'm doing is going to have some kind of ripple effect. It's going to matter in some way, even if it's only to me.
Right.
But even if it's only to us, that affects the person who's sitting right next to us too. And then what you were saying, also every single day is a new chapter. It's a new moment. It's a new scene in our film, in our eternal film, where we get to dictate what we do by practicing.
Right.
And I just wanted to add to the end of this particular episode that I want to invite our listeners and our viewers, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, put in the comments section. Would like to know, what are some of your specific fears, and if you have any thoughts or advice on what you've done to surmount those fears, overcome them. We'd love to hear it.
That'd be great. And no mocking other people's fears.
That's right. Thanks for tuning in. I'm David Segall.
I'm Connor Cherland.
And we'll see you next episode.
Next episode. Episode 4.
Woo!
Attack of the Clones.